When I was 18, I experienced something that has haunted me ever since. I live now in Golden, a small town nestled in the Rocky Mountains of British Columbia, Canada. Life here suits me. Peaceful, quiet, and surrounded by nature. At 28, I'm single, introverted, and content to spend my days hiking, reading, and working remotely. But every now and then, a memory creeps in, reminding me of just how unpredictable life can be. Back when I was 18, I was far less cautious and a little more reckless. My best friends, Jake and Daniel, were my partners in crime. Jake, tall and athletic, had a wild streak that made him the life of every party. Daniel, on the other hand, was calm and mature, always the voice of reason. He was 20 at the time, and Jake was 19. But despite our slight age differences, we were inseparable. It was a warm summer evening when Jake proposed we take a road trip to Banff. The idea sounded perfect. Daniel had a beat-up old sedan that somehow still ran, and we figured a late-night drive would be the perfect way to shake off the monotony of our small-town lives. The three of us piled into the car, spirits high and music blaring, with no real plan other than to hit the open road. As we drove, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The highway stretched on endlessly, flanked by dense forests on either side. It was one of those remote two-lane roads where you could drive for miles without seeing another car, the kind of road that felt like it belonged to another era, untouched by time. About 4 hours into the trip, our excitement began to wane. The fuel gauge dipped dangerously close to empty, and Jake, who had been driving, sheepishly admitted he'd forgotten to fill up before we left. We all groaned in unison, berating ourselves for not checking earlier. "We'll find a gas station soon," Daniel said, ever the optimist. But as the minutes ticked by and the engine began to sputter, it became clear that we weren't going to make it. The car coasted to a stop in the middle of nowhere, the headlights cutting through the pitch-black night. We sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of our situation sinking in. No cell service, no nearby towns, and not a single car in sight. "Great," Jake muttered, slamming the steering wheel. "This is just great." "We'll figure it out," Daniel said. "Let's call for help." Fortunately, we were able to get a faint signal on my phone after some maneuvering, and I managed to call the police. They assured us they'd send someone, but it might take a while given our remote location. With no choice but to wait, we settled in, trying to make the best of it. After a while, nature called. I hesitated, but eventually decided to step outside to relieve myself, near the edge of the forest. The air was crisp and eerily silent, with only the faint rustle of leaves breaking the stillness. As I finished and turned to head back to the car, I froze. A massive shadow moved in the distance, just beyond the tree line. Then I saw it. A bear, enormous and hulking, stepped into the faint glow of the car's headlights. Its fur was matted, and its eyes glinted with a predatory sharpness that made my blood run cold. My heart pounded as I slowly backed away, praying it hadn't noticed me. But the moment I moved, its head snapped in my direction. Panic took over. I bolted for the car, adrenaline propelling me forward as the bear let out a guttural growl and started toward me. I barely made it to the driver's side door, flinging it open and diving inside just as the bear reached the car. "Don't move," Daniel whispered, his voice steady but tense. The bear circled the car, its claws scraping against the metal as it sniffed and huffed. My clothes were soaked with sweat and, to my embarrassment, urine, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was the sheer size of the animal and the terrifying sound of its breathing just inches away. It felt like hours as the bear prowled around us, occasionally pressing its massive body against the car, causing it to rock slightly. None of us dared to make a sound. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the distant sound of sirens broke the silence. The bear's ears perked up, and it let out a low growl before retreating back into the woods, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. The red and blue lights of a police car came into view. The officers listened patiently as we recounted what had happened, their expressions a mix of disbelief and concern. They assured us we were lucky to be alive and escorted us back to town, keeping a close eye on the surrounding forest. When we got back to Daniel's house, his parents were waiting, their faces a mix of relief and anger. They scolded us for being so careless, but their stern words were softened by the tight hugs they gave us. Exhausted and shaken, I stayed at Daniel's that night, too rattled to return to my empty house. As I lay on the couch in their living room, I couldn't shake the memory of the bear's eyes, sharp and unrelenting. Even now, a decade later, that night is seared into my mind, a reminder of just how fragile we are against the forces of nature. I never thought a road trip could change my life, but it did, and not in the way you'd hope. It started last summer. I had just gone through a messy breakup with my fiancé, James. We'd been together for 6 years, and breaking it off felt like tearing a piece of my identity away. I was emotionally drained, so when my best friend Lauren suggested a cross-country road trip to clear my head, I jumped at the chance. Lauren was the kind of person who radiated confidence and spontaneity. She had this way of making me believe everything would be okay, no matter how broken I felt. Her battered Jeep Wrangler, loaded with snacks, a hastily made playlist, and a couple of overnight bags, became our escape vehicle. Our route took us through a mix of small towns and long stretches of open highway, the kind where you drive for hours without seeing anything but endless flatlands and the occasional faded billboard. On the third day, somewhere in Kansas, we hit one of those stretches. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the road. I remember the radio crackling as we lost signal, leaving us with the hum of the Jeep's engine and the occasional crunch of gravel when Lauren veered too close to the shoulder. That's when I noticed the truck. It was an old rusted pickup, the kind you'd expect to see abandoned in someone's backyard. I spotted it in the rearview mirror, its headlights barely visible in the dusky light. It was far behind us, almost unnoticeable, but something about it felt off. "Do you see that truck?" I asked Lauren, trying to sound casual. She glanced in the rearview mirror and shrugged. "Yeah, why?" "I don't know. It's been back there for a while." "Probably just someone heading the same way," she said, brushing it off. "Relax, Ellie. You're overthinking." I tried to convince myself she was right, but the uneasy feeling lingered. An hour later, the truck was still there. It hadn't gotten closer, but it hadn't fallen back either. Just this constant presence, always in the distance. Lauren finally took it seriously when we pulled onto a side road and saw it reappear behind us a few minutes later. "Okay, this isn't normal," she said, her tone tight with concern. By now it was pitch black outside, and the only lights came from the Jeep's high beams and the truck tailing us. I couldn't take it anymore. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I tried to steady my voice. "Hi, we're on Highway 36, heading west out of Franklin. There's a truck that's been following us for hours. We've tried turning off, speeding up, slowing down. It's still there." The operator's tone shifted, becoming more serious. "Okay, stay calm. Do not pull over or stop. Are you near any landmarks or towns?" I glanced out the window at the endless stretch of farmland. "No, it's just fields and road. We're going to direct you to the nearest police station. Can you keep driving?" Lauren nodded as I relayed the question. "Yeah, we can keep going." The operator told us the police station was about 15 minutes away in a small town called Auburn. She stayed on the line, asking questions about the truck while giving us step-by-step directions. Lauren pushed the Jeep faster than I'd ever seen her drive, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. The truck stayed with us the entire time, matching our speed like it knew where we were going. My heart pounded as we finally turned onto the main street of Auburn, the faint glow of streetlights making the town feel like a mirage. "That's the station," Lauren said, pointing to a squat brick building up ahead. The operator spoke again. "When you arrive, pull into the lot. Officers will meet you outside. Don't leave your vehicle until they're with you." But just as we turned onto the street leading to the station, the truck slowed down. I watched in disbelief as it drifted to the side of the road and made a U-turn, its headlights disappearing into the darkness. "They're leaving," I whispered. Lauren didn't relax until we were parked safely in front of the station, two officers waiting for us under the fluorescent lights. We explained everything. From the first moment I saw the truck to the call with 911. One of the officers sighed and shook his head. "We've had reports about a truck like that before. No plates, right?" "Yeah," Lauren said. "What's going on? Who's driving it?" The officer looked at his partner before answering. "That's the thing. Nobody's ever gotten close enough to see. They always drive off when police get involved." We spent the night in a motel just a block from the station. I barely slept, replaying the night over and over in my head. Who was in that truck? Why were they following us? And how did they know when to leave? I still don't have answers, but one thing's for sure. I'll never take those empty highways for granted again. Last spring, I was driving home to Arizona after visiting my sister in Colorado. It was an exhausting 13-hour drive, but I didn't mind. I had podcasts, snacks, and the promise of my own bed at the end of it. I decided to take a more scenic route, avoiding the main interstates for quieter highways cutting through small towns and open desert. The first 6 hours were uneventful, but by late afternoon, I was already feeling the fatigue set in. My car, a reliable but aging Honda Civic, hummed steadily as I sipped on lukewarm gas station coffee. The sun was sinking behind the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. I told myself I'd make it another 2 hours before stopping for the night. But as darkness swallowed the landscape, I started to feel uneasy. There was no one else on the road, just miles of empty highway and the occasional scrubby bush illuminated by my headlights. That's when I saw the sign for a rest stop. It wasn't one of those big, well-lit areas with vending machines and bathrooms. It was just a dirt lot with a few picnic tables and an outhouse. Normally, I would have driven right past it, but I needed a break. I pulled in, parking close to the single light pole casting a dim yellow glow. The place was completely deserted, which wasn't surprising given the time and location. I stretched my legs, checked my phone, no service of course, and debated whether to use the outhouse before getting back on the road. That's when I saw him. He was standing at the far edge of the rest stop near a cluster of bushes. At first, I thought he might have been a hitchhiker or another traveler stopping for the night, but something about him made me pause. He wasn't moving, just standing there, half hidden in the shadows. I pretended not to notice and walked back to my car, keeping him in the corner of my eye. My hand was on the door handle when he suddenly stepped forward, into the light. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice raspy and uneven. "Do you have a phone I can use?" Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get in the car and leave, but I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid, so I forced a tight smile. "Sorry, I don't have service out here." He nodded slowly, but he didn't leave. Instead, he took another step closer. "Where are you headed?" he asked, his tone casual, but there was something menacing about the way he said it, like he already knew the answer. "Home," I replied shortly, opening my car door. Before I could get in, he took another step closer, his hand resting on the hood of my car. "You should be careful out here," he said, almost like a warning. "Lots of bad people on these roads." I didn't respond. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might faint. I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors. As soon as I started the car, he stepped back, but then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A pair of headlights pulling out from the side of the rest stop. A beat-up white sedan suddenly sped past me, screeching to a stop directly in front of my car. Two men got out, their faces hidden in the shadows. I froze for a moment, watching them approach, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to wait and see what they wanted. I slammed the car into reverse, backing up just enough to swerve around the sedan. My tires kicked up dirt as I floored it, speeding back onto the highway. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel steady, but I didn't dare slow down. It didn't take long before I saw the sedan's headlights in my rearview mirror. They were chasing me, matching my speed no matter how fast I went. I was running out of options and had no idea what these men wanted, but I wasn't about to stop. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher gave me instructions to stay on the main road and head for a nearby town with a police station. They promised to send officers to intercept me, and I just focused on keeping the car moving. The sedan stayed behind me for miles, always close enough to remind me they were there. But as I got closer to the town, something changed. I could see the faint glow of streetlights ahead, and suddenly, the sedan slowed down. I watched in disbelief as they made a sharp turn onto a side road, speeding off into the darkness. By the time I reached the police station, my nerves were completely shot. 2 officers were waiting for me outside, and I practically collapsed as I told them what had happened. They took my statement and promised to investigate, but I could tell they didn't have high hopes of finding the men. "These stretches of highway can be dangerous," one of them said. "You're lucky you didn't stop."